The sound of water dripping echoed through the quiet house, breaking the stillness of the afternoon. I had called the plumber earlier in the day, hoping to fix the leaky faucet in the upstairs bathroom before it turned into a bigger problem. Little did I know, that simple call would change everything. It all started innocently enough. The plumber, a polite man in his late 30s, arrived promptly and got to work. I showed him to the bathroom and left him to handle the repairs while I went back to my work in the living room. The faint sounds of tools clinking and running water blended into the background as I focused on answering emails. But then, something strange happened. After about 30 minutes, I realized the noises from the bathroom had stopped. Curious, I decided to check on the progress. As I climbed the stairs, a nervous energy crept over me, though I couldn't explain why. When I reached the bathroom door, I noticed it was slightly ajar, and I could hear muffled voices inside. My heart raced. Who could he be talking to? I hadn't heard anyone else come in. Pushing the door open slowly, I froze. What I saw left me speechless. There he was, standing there, his expression tense and his phone in hand. But it wasn't just what he was doing, it was what he was saying that made my stomach drop. The words were cryptic, but the tone was unmistakably serious. Before I could process the situation, he noticed me standing there. His eyes widened, and he quickly shoved the phone into his pocket. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the knot tightening in my chest. He hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Yeah, just wrapping up." But something about his demeanor didn't feel right. As he packed up his tools and hurried down the stairs, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. And when I looked around the bathroom, I noticed something strange, a small, unfamiliar object tucked into the corner behind the sink. My breath caught. What was it doing there, and how did it connect to the plumber's odd behavior? I hesitated before picking up the small object behind the sink. It was a tiny, sleek black device, no larger than a matchbox. At first, I thought it might be part of the plumber's tools that he had accidentally left behind, but as I turned it over in my hand, I realized it wasn't something I recognized. It looked almost like a hidden camera? My stomach churned at the thought. Why would something like this be here? And more importantly, who had put it there? I placed it on the counter, staring at it like it might somehow explain itself. My mind raced back to the plumber's strange behavior, the phone call, the nervous glance, the way he'd rushed out of the house. Could it have been him? The thought felt ridiculous. He'd seemed normal, just doing his job. But then again, how well do we ever really know strangers who step into our homes? Trying to steady my nerves, I sat down on the edge of the bathtub and replayed the events in my mind. I thought about how I'd called the plumbing company earlier that morning. They'd assigned someone right away, and everything seemed professional. But now, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Had I unknowingly invited trouble into my home? As I sat there, I heard a faint buzz coming from the counter. My eyes darted to the device. It had a tiny red light blinking on its side. My heart skipped a beat. What was it doing? Was it recording? Transmitting something? I grabbed my phone, not sure if I should call the plumber back or alert someone else entirely. But what would I even say? I didn't have any proof that he'd done anything wrong. For all I knew, this thing could have been here long before today. The possibilities only made my anxiety grow. Who else had access to my bathroom? Could someone have planted this without me knowing? I thought about the times I'd had friends over, the cleaning crew that came by every 2 weeks, even the landlord checking on repairs. My head spun with the endless questions. As I paced the bathroom, the weight of the situation pressed down on me. I didn't know who to trust or what to believe. The device sat silently on the counter, a tiny object that suddenly made my safe space feel anything but secure. Something wasn't right, and I was determined to find out what was really going on. I couldn't leave the device sitting there, taunting me with its silence. Grabbing a tissue, I wrapped it carefully and slipped it into a drawer, as if hiding it would somehow give me time to think. My head was still spinning with questions, but I knew I couldn't let my fear cloud my judgment. I decided to call the plumbing company to check if this man was even legitimate. Maybe this was all a misunderstanding. Maybe. When the receptionist answered, I tried to keep my voice calm. I gave her my details and described the plumber who had come to my house. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Yes, we did send someone out," she finally said, her voice hesitant. "But he should have finished hours ago." "Is something wrong?" I hesitated. Should I tell her about the device? The strange phone call? The uneasy feeling in my gut? "No," I said finally, trying to sound casual. "He just seemed like he was in a hurry, that's all. I wanted to make sure he didn't forget anything." The receptionist sounded relieved and assured me they'd check in with him. But as I hung up, I realized I was no closer to understanding what was happening. If he worked for them, then why had he been acting so suspicious? And what was that thing I'd found in the bathroom? I couldn't stop thinking about the plumber's expression when I walked in, caught between surprise and guilt. It reminded me of the way my ex used to look when he'd been hiding something. That thought sent a shiver through me. Could it be connected to him? We'd broken up months ago, but he'd always had a way of lingering in my life, leaving small, unsettling reminders of his presence. Feeling the walls of my house closing in on me, I decided to go through the bathroom one more time. I checked every corner, every cabinet, looking for anything else that seemed out of place. That's when I noticed something I'd missed earlier, a small smudge on the mirror. It looked like a fingerprint, but not mine. The faint mark seemed deliberate, like someone had pressed their finger against the glass intentionally. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Was someone watching me? And if they were, why? Every shadow in the house suddenly felt heavier, every sound sharper. I wasn't just imagining things anymore, something was seriously wrong. The smudge on the mirror pulled me deeper into my spiraling thoughts. I pressed my hand against the glass, comparing it to the faint fingerprint. It wasn't mine. My hands were smaller, the shape different. Someone else had been here. My chest tightened as I stared at my reflection, trying to piece it all together. The plumber's behavior, the strange device, now this. Was it all connected, or was my mind running wild? I stepped out of the bathroom and leaned against the hallway wall, my ears straining for any sound. The house was silent, but it didn't feel comforting. It felt hollow, like it was holding secrets I couldn't yet uncover. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't truly alone. Every creak of the floorboards made my heart jump, every shadow seemed to stretch just a little too far. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket, jolting me out of my thoughts. It was an unknown number. My fingers hovered over the screen before I hesitantly answered. "Hello?" For a moment, there was nothing but static. Then, a voice came through, a man's voice, calm but unnervingly deliberate. "Did you find it?" My breath caught. "Who is this?" I demanded, my voice trembling despite my attempt to sound firm. The line went silent for a beat before he responded, "You shouldn't have touched it." And just like that, the call ended. I stood frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. My mind raced. He knew. Whoever he was, he knew I had found the device. My hands shook as I locked the doors and windows, suddenly hyper-aware of how exposed I was. I thought about calling the police, but what could I even tell them? That a plumber had left a strange gadget in my bathroom and someone creepy had called me about it? I had no proof of wrongdoing, just a growing sense of dread. As I paced the living room, trying to decide what to do, a loud thud came from upstairs. My heart dropped into my stomach. I grabbed the nearest object, a heavy glass paperweight, and crept toward the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last as I approached the bathroom again. The door was wide open now, though I was certain I'd left it shut. The light inside flickered once, then went out. My grip tightened around the paperweight as I stood at the threshold, staring into the dark. I wasn't sure what I'd find, but I knew there was no turning back. Standing at the edge of the bathroom doorway, I felt my breath hitch. The flickering light had stopped, leaving the room in darkness, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was inside. My hand trembled as I reached for the switch, flicking it up and down, but nothing happened. The bulb had gone out completely. Stepping inside, I gripped the paperweight tightly, the cold glass grounding me against the wave of unease washing over me. The air felt heavier in the bathroom, like it was pressing down on me, suffocating and still. I scanned the room, my eyes struggling to adjust to the dim light spilling in from the hallway. Everything seemed untouched, exactly as I'd left it, except for the cabinet under the sink. The door was slightly ajar. I could have sworn it had been closed earlier. Slowly, I crouched down, every nerve in my body screaming at me to stop. I hesitated before pulling the cabinet door open completely, half expecting something to jump out. But there was nothing unusual inside, just cleaning supplies and a few spare rolls of toilet paper. I let out a shaky breath, trying to calm the pounding in my chest. But then I noticed it, a small piece of paper, folded neatly and tucked behind the pipe. It hadn't been there before. My hands shook as I unfolded it, revealing a single sentence scrawled in uneven handwriting, "You shouldn't be here." The paper slipped from my fingers as I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the paperweight. My mind raced. Someone had been here, in my house, leaving notes and devices and who knows what else. And they were still watching me. The phone call, the smudge on the mirror, the light going out, it all felt orchestrated, like I was being toyed with. Suddenly, I heard a noise behind me, a faint creak coming from the hallway. I spun around, my pulse racing, but the hallway was empty. Still, the sound had been real. Someone was moving around. My grip on the paperweight tightened as I stepped back into the hall, glancing toward the staircase. And that's when I saw it, a shadow moving against the wall, distinct and deliberate. It wasn't mine. The shape passed quickly, disappearing around the corner at the end of the hall. My instincts told me to run, to get out of the house as fast as I could, but another part of me refused to back down. I couldn't leave without knowing who, or what, was doing this. I crept toward the corner, my steps slow and measured, trying to keep my breathing quiet. Every creak of the floor felt amplified in the silence. When I reached the end of the hall, I peered around the corner, expecting to find nothing. But instead, I froze. The door to the guest bedroom, which I knew I had shut earlier, was now wide open. Inside, I could see the faint glow of a screen, my laptop, sitting on the desk. The screen was unlocked, and an unfamiliar email was open. The subject line read, "This is your final warning." I couldn't move. My heart pounded in my chest as I stood in the doorway, staring at the glowing screen in the guest bedroom. The email sat there like a warning, mocking me, taunting me with its cryptic message. My first instinct was to run, to leave this house and never look back. But something kept me rooted to the spot. I needed to know who was behind this. I needed to understand why this was happening to me. With a deep breath, I stepped into the room, my eyes glued to the screen. The email was open, the cursor hovering over a reply box, like someone had been preparing to send a message. As I moved closer, I noticed something even more chilling. There were files open on the laptop. Photos. My photos. Pictures of me taken in different parts of the house, some I didn't even remember being taken. A snapshot of me sitting on the couch, one of me standing at the bathroom mirror, looking oblivious to the camera. My skin crawled. How could someone have been watching me like this? Who had taken these photos, and why? I scanned the rest of the screen, my mind racing. The email's contents were almost too much to process. It wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. You've been chosen. The game is just beginning. A noise behind me made me spin around. My heart skipped a beat. Standing in the doorway was the plumber, the same man who had come to fix my sink. He wasn't holding any tools now, just a phone in his hand, his face unreadable. The shock of seeing him here, of realizing that he was the one behind everything, nearly knocked the air from my lungs. He stepped into the room slowly, his eyes locked on mine. "You've been asking too many questions," he said, his voice low. "And now you know too much." I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but my throat felt tight, like the words couldn't escape. The man didn't seem to care about my shock. He raised his phone and pressed a button, and suddenly, the lights flickered back on in the bathroom, the hum of the ceiling light filling the silence. He turned toward the door, motioning for me to follow him. I didn't know what to do. Should I run? Fight? But just as I made a move, I felt a cold chill at the back of my neck. The door behind me slammed shut, and the room darkened once again. Only this time, when the light came back on, it wasn't just the plumber standing there. I wasn't alone. There was someone else, someone I hadn't seen before. But this time, the shadow was unmistakable. The person I thought I had lost months ago, the one who had haunted me with their presence in my life, was standing in the corner of the room, watching me. And they were smiling. The air in the room seemed to freeze as I stared at the person in the corner. My heart raced in my chest, and for a moment, I couldn't even breathe. The man who had haunted my past, the one I had tried to escape from, was standing right there, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. He hadn't been the one to fix the sink. He hadn't been a plumber at all. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The plumber, no, the man who had been pretending to be one, smiled and slowly walked toward me. "And quote, you never really left, did you?" End quote, he said softly. "And quote, you think you can just escape your past? But it always finds you." End quote. I could hardly process his words. The photographs, the hidden device, the strange events, they had all been part of his twisted game, part of a plan to pull me back into his world, to make me feel trapped once again. My mind whirled with disbelief. How had he found me? How had he been able to manipulate every situation so precisely? "End quote, you think I was just a plumber," end quote, he continued, his voice dripping with mockery. "End quote, no. I've been watching you, tracking you. And now, I've made sure you'll never forget the past." End quote. His words stung like a slap. Everything I'd gone through, every strange event, had been orchestrated by him. The device, the phone call, even the emails, they were all his doing. The twisted thing was, I had never suspected him, never once thought that the one person I thought I could leave behind was still so deeply embedded in my life. But then, just as I was about to crumble under the weight of his words, I heard a noise, a loud crash from the back of the house. The sound of shuffling footsteps, followed by a familiar voice shouting my name. It was my friend, Rachel, who had been coming over to visit. She must have heard the commotion and rushed in to check on me. The plumber's eyes flicked toward the door, and in that moment, I seized the opportunity. I grabbed the paperweight from the desk and threw it at him, hitting him squarely in the chest. As he stumbled back, I ran for the door, throwing myself into the hallway just as Rachel burst into the room. We didn't stop to look back. I grabbed Rachel's hand and pulled her out of the house, the man's voice echoing behind us. "This isn't over," he called after us, but we didn't listen. Outside, as the cool night air hit my face, I finally let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. We didn't look back. The game was over, but the scars would remain. I had faced my fears, fought against the manipulation, and escaped the nightmare that had followed me for so long. But the truth was, some things never fully leave you. They just wait for the right moment to remind you that the past can still catch up. And sometimes, you have to make peace with that.